Welcome back to Martins and More. My name's Maury Rutch. Spoon Phillips is out sick, but it doesn't mean we're not going to have a great program because we have some really, really entertaining stuff for you today. You may have recognized in past episodes and past seasons people like Doug Young, Teja Gerken. Well, they are both here today, and I'm extremely excited to bring you a very cool program, even if we don't have the Spoon Phillips to make it even better. Sit back and relax and enjoy our conversation with Teja Gerken and Doug Young. This episode is brought to you by our Patreon members. Join our growing community for early access to every episode, exclusive video versions of the podcast, behind-the-scenes footage, full-length product demos, and more. We appreciate you. Well, look what we have here.
He's in the building!
Well, hi, Maury.
Hi, Maury.
Well, what's the old adage? If you don't have Spoon Phillips, it takes at least two people to fill that role. I don't know if you guys can do it, but are you willing to try?
Sure.
Yes. I think this is the first time Doug and I have been on at the same time.
It is. It really is.
Right.
And it would have been even more fun with Spoon, but this is going to be a really cool show.
Here we are. Doug and I had hoped to actually be in the same room at the same time, but we couldn't figure out the timing to do it. So here we are. I'm in San Rafael, California. Doug's down in Mountain View.
Mountain View. Yep.
Wonderful. And because you've both been on the program, I would like to ask, with your blessing, if we could maybe skip the really important but duplicated backstory. If our viewers can be invited to watch those previous episodes, could I take a moment to ask you guys what's new and exciting for you guys together as a duo today, and what's the genesis and the timing of what we have to talk about on today's program?
Go ahead, Doug.
Well, we have a new release. That's the main thing. That's the most exciting thing at the moment. Just came out Friday, right?
Last Friday, yeah.
So
Awesome.
we've we put out a CD in 2020, our first duets album, and ever since then, mostly, in fact, largely through the pandemic, we continued coming up with new material and recording new things, and finally we put it out as a collection. And this time it's called "The Water Is Wide," after one of the songs on the release.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we're pretty excited about it. Some of the material we've put out as singles, sort of over time, but it's nice to kind of tie it all together. And I think it flows really well as an album, and it's a nice continuation of the first album that we did, the Duets album. Similar approach to things. It's all just us playing. There's no additional instruments, no overdubs, it's two organic acoustic guitars, and we've always been really into trying to come up with arrangements where we might be in two different tunings, different capo positions, to really kind of expand the sonic range of two guitars, of what it can do, trying to come up with sort of an interlocking approach to guitar duets. And I think we came up with another 12 tunes that do that.
Wow.
This is a little bit different this time around. I think most of the first album we recorded here in my studio together.
Yeah.
And whereas this one, because a lot of it was recorded during COVID, various pieces were recorded separately, and we had a little different process, for bouncing things back and forth.
Totally.
Lots of, here's what I might play, what would you play? Oh, you'll play that, I'll play something different, and back and forth, because we were doing it remotely.
We even used Jack Tripp for a while to rehearse in real time, and then record our parts separately. But yeah, so Doug is right. The Duets album was all recorded in Doug's studio. This one, I think only one of the tracks we both recorded in his place. The other stuff I recorded in my studio, and Doug recorded in his. We just, during COVID, got used to that process, and it worked out well because it allows both of us to spend a little more time on our parts.
Well, that's fascinating, and I think I want to try to ask you guys what somebody might ask me to ask you. When I hear you guys talk like that, from a player's perspective, I can appreciate playing fingerstyle guitar and wanting to come up with a part, and then I can immediately think, this would sound so good with Doug, and I want to call him over. What stops you? Maybe it's a dumb question. What stops you from saying, and we should also add Is there another person that's almost in this circle, or does it just feel like it's always a duo? Because you must know 20 more people.
So Doug and I live about an hour and a half apart, so it's not that easy. I mean, we get together pretty often, but certainly during COVID, we didn't see each other in real life for, I think it was almost a year.
2 years.
Wow.
It's kind of hard to remember. We forget now, but those first few months of total lockdown were a different scene altogether. I think it's a good thing that we were established as a duo and we sort of got used to arranging stuff and recording things together on our first album. So by the time we sort of kept going, we kind of had a general sort of way of how we do things in place, wouldn't you say, Doug?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely helped. Although, I was just thinking, it's not that we didn't do what Maury's suggesting. During lockdown, we did a quartet with Bruce Marla. We did a thing with Charlie Roux and Benjamin Gillette.
That's true, yeah. So we did actually expand, and that was really fun. We did a quartet on Here Comes the Sun, which is one of the tunes that's on the Duets record, and we expanded it with Marla Feibisch and Bruce Victor playing mandolin and what was it, mandocello. It's on YouTube. People can check it out. It's a really fun sort of expansion of that, and that was done during lockdown. So we were in 3 different locations because Bruce and Marla are married, so they live together and they were allowed in the same room. But the other one with Charlie Roux, who's in New York, and Benjamin Gillet, who's in France. It was completely transcontinental. I recorded it in my place here in California, Doug in his place, Charlie was in New York, and Benjamin was in France. And that's also on YouTube, and that's a really fun little clip.
Oh, wow.
We did a quintet with Maurice Tani.
Oh, that's right. So, yeah.
Yeah, so Maurice is a Bay Area icon who's singer, songwriter, and performer. And he had a tune that he wanted us to play on. He sent us deliberately a rough version of the song that had no timing, no tempo, no style. He played a chord on every bar, just boom, and he sang.
What?
And asked us to come up with the arrangement. So we didn't know what the feel of the song was. We didn't even really know what the tempo should be. And what we did was we came up with an arrangement of it, and we duplicated each of ourselves. So we each played 2 different guitars. We ended up with a kind of a 4-guitar orchestra.
So Doug and I turned ourselves into a quartet, yeah.
And sent it back to Maurice, who said, I don't even recognize this song anymore, but recorded his vocal on top of it. And it came out pretty cool.
It's a pretty cool video. Yeah, that's also on YouTube. We'll send you a link to that because that came out pretty cool and it was pretty ambitious. And Doug and I play nylon string guitar and baritone on it, and Doug plays standard guitar and your mini 12-string, right? Your little Griffin.
I used a little Vilek Griffin.
Yeah. So it's a huge sound, and so to your question, we have expanded, and that has been really fun.
Most of what we do, we're focused on what we can play live. Is
right.
The flip side of this.
Right.
Which is anything.
Yeah, and that is kind of. But I think we both really like the sound of keeping it organic, just keeping it as 2 guitars, and sort of resist the temptation of adding much more material. Like we've thought about, well, would it be nice to have a percussionist on this or a bass? There was a tune, I forget what the tune was, Doug, where we almost felt like we had to add a bass or something like that to make it work. And then, a lot of times when you feel that temptation of adding stuff, it really means that you haven't worked hard enough on the arrangement. And so sometimes taking a step back and seeing, well, how would it sound better with just the 2 of us doing it live?
And we did that on a tune, not for our duet projects, but my tune, whose name is escaping me at the moment, we did a tune on one of my albums where
Right.
you played on my tune, and I had a bass player and a percussionist. Had Brian Rice
right.
from Wake of the Dead playing percussion.
Yeah.
But then we later redid that tune with just the two of us, and it worked just as
Right.
well.
And we changed the arrangement a bit when we did it as a duo. So
Yep.
so I think that's kind of our basic sound really is stuff that we can do live. There's nothing on the album that we can't do just sitting in a room with two guitars. And would the music have a broader appeal if we added more stuff? For some people, probably. People like having additional things, but to us, and I think to a lot of people in the guitar world, just having it be two guitars is just a really nice thing. And we keep coming back to kind of like, some of our favorite guitar duets. We keep coming back very originally. The John Renbourn and Bert Jansch duo, that's still the gold standard almost 60 years later. And I think, of course, then like on the totally other end of the spectrum, you have the Assad brothers who are just phenomenal playing classical and Brazilian music on two guitars. We have, our friend Steve Boffman and Robin Bullock have a couple of beautiful duet records. And I think in some ways, those three albums are kind of the ones that we actually like sat down with and listened to and said, this is kind of how we want to sound.
Huh. Agree, disagree, Doug?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Some of the characteristics, so like for example, Steve and Robin are doing something similar to what we do, in that they're both playing fingerstyle, they're playing harmonies and supporting each other, and it's not one guy strumming and the other guy playing lead, that kind of thing, which we've generally avoided.
Yeah, that's kind of a whole thing. On there, every now and then we sort of have distinct sort of rhythm and lead roles, but in general, that is something that we consciously try to avoid, to just do it like. There are sections where one of us will play a solo, but none of our arrangements are sort of about like, showing off soloing chops or something like that. Which
that has confused people when we play live. We'll show up for a gig and the sound guy will say, "So which one of you is lead guitar player? Which one of you is the rhythm guitar player?"
That finally happened a while ago. So
oh, awesome.
Yeah. So the arrangement process is it's not always the same, but I'd say about half the material on The Water is Wide, including the title tune, are pieces where one of us might have had a solo arrangement of it and the other added to it, and that can be a really fun thing to do. It can also be quite challenging, especially if the solo arrangement is pretty worked out, because it doesn't leave that much space to do it. So I think that's kind of where the different guitar sounds come in for us, and the different tunings to kind of avoid being in the same territory so easily. It's kind of part of the puzzle. It's harder to do it that way than to have super defined roles. You strum the chords, you play the melody. That's a pretty straightforward way of going about it. But to add something without overdoing it to something that already works as a solo arrangement can be really fun and really sort of broaden the spectrum.
So, for example, are you saying one thing might happen where you might be playing in Dadgad, but Doug might be in a different open tuning and you're not in the same one?
Absolutely, all the time.
Weird. Really?
Yeah.
In fact, once in a while we say, "Hey, you're in the same tuning I'm in." How did that happen?
Yeah.
Accidentally.
Yeah.
I think on the album there's one tune where we're both in standard tuning with no capos.
No.
Yes.
That's rare.
Yeah.
Boy, that's lazy.
But, and sometimes we're in different tunings. But the last tune we just recorded, we just put a video up of this. It's a tune called Josephine's Waltz, written by Roger Tallroth of the band Fasten. We're both in Dadgad, but I'm capoed up 5 and Doug's playing open. So I'm basically playing it out of D, but we're playing in the key of D, but I'm playing as if I was playing in D in Dadgad, and Doug's playing in G in Dadgad open. So we use a totally different set of open strings to make it work.
That's wild.
Why don't we show them an example? We could break a tune down a little bit.
You
You
up for
play your
that?
part, I'll show what I play.
Yeah. So actually, the opening cut that we do on the album is Eric Sky's "The Lock Tender's Reel," which is a great tune. And Eric plays it he either plays it in standard or drop D. I'm not sure, but definitely not in a tuning. And during the pandemic, I just got a bug in my bonnet to work it out, and I play it in Orkney tuning, which I play in a lot, which is C, G, D, G, C, D, except I have a capo on right now, so everything's up a whole step. And I do that to stay in the same key, to stay in A, like where Eric plays it. So my part goes like this. So that's the main A part. And why don't we hear what Doug came up with on top of that? We can't do it live because of the bandwidth issues here. So maybe Doug can play his part, and then we can fly in a video or a recording of us doing it.
Sure. Let's see. So I'm in Dadgad tuning, which interestingly is similar to Orkney, but shifted over a string. And I'm capo 2, and then in Dadgad playing in the key of A, to be in the same key as he is. And the challenge on this, of course, was that what Teja just played is pretty complete and full and there. So what I tried to do was a combination of keeping things fairly simple, supporting the harmony, and occasionally harmonizing lines. So I'm playing. And then a little harmony. Again, a little harmony line. So when you put those together, you just sort of hear my little descending harmony line against his melody, and then occasionally we join up with harmonizing the same melody line.
And this tune is one where we each play a solo, so we also play the chords, but because of the tunings, they sound pretty different the way each one of us play them. So this is a good example of really taking advantage of the different sonorities of playing in different tunings. Even though we're kind of in the same range because we're both capo 2, and it's not radically different, but it's kind of accessing different open strings that really work out well for that. So this is a pretty typical approach that we'll take, except like in this case, I was the one who had the fundamental arrangement of the tune, and Doug added to it, and sometimes it's the other way around. Doug will have a tune, and either I'll say, hey, that tune of yours, I should come up with something for that, or he'll say, I've got this tune, why don't you try to come up with something to that? So
the other thing goes on in Lock Tenders is we actually do trade the melody back and forth, which evolved as we did the arrangement.
Oh.
It's, why don't you take the melody in the B section, and so we're constantly, in fact, there's even the second time through, we're kind of switching back and forth between phrases. Teja plays the first
because I'm playing it down low. And playing kind of some bigger chords.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then I pop in with the second half of the melody.
Yeah. So it's that puzzle piece. I mean, it's in some ways it's no different from arranging a solo guitar piece where you're trying to, the way I always think about it, if you're ready to move on to a new idea, really step back and see if you can develop the original idea a little bit more, because and that kind of comes with the way we arrange duets. If you go through it once, there is probably another 2 or 3 ways to play the exact same phrases, just in different parts of the guitars. And, sort of exploring that is kind of part of what makes a duet kind of a more worked out thing than just a jamming kind of thing. I mean, we're not a big jamming duet. Like if you just threw a real book in front of us, we probably wouldn't be very interesting. But kind of, stepping back and working it out and putting it together, and either being in the same room working it out, or in the case of this album, just sending MP3s back and forth. That's been really kind of the way we've been doing a lot of things. Like I'll send Doug a totally rough thing, sometimes even just a video on my phone or something like that. Here, work with that. And he'll either say, nah, I don't think we got anything there, or, that'll be enough to kind of come up with a second part. And then the next step might be to, do a rough recording with both of us doing it and see where we can take it from there. So things sort of go back and forth quite a bit. And at some point, we both work in Logic. So at some point, we'll just actually send a Logic file back and forth and sort of add to it. And, I think some of the sort of work in progress things just developed into the final cuts in that actual Logic file that just kept growing. A lot of times we'll end up going back and sort of start from scratch and just do it for real, so to speak. So
yeah. Well, I'm going to ask something that I think our viewers are really curious about. If you wouldn't mind indulging me, I know it's probably going right over a cliff, but they're listening to this or they're watching it on YouTube. And if you are, thank you very much for being here. We're talking in real time. You guys are both playing. What happens if you both count to 4 and try to play 40 seconds of that arrangement together? I know the answer, but would you mind showing our viewers why we're not doing that? Don't laugh.
Let's try it.
Kick it off.
2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's why we're not doing
that. May have worked better than we expected, but it's
actually,
not.
I hate you because that sounds beautiful. Even out of time, if you guys take your album and start left side of it like 4 seconds ahead, it still sounds beautiful. Right. So now I'm just angry. That was wrong.
Well, anyway, so if people, go check out the album. And actually, one thing to say about this The Water is White is a digital-only release. We're not selling CDs. We're not selling downloads, mostly because we'd have to license all the cover tunes that are on there and everything. So it's all on all the streaming services, basically. People can check it out on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, everywhere. And we hope that people do. And, if folks like it, the way to help us out with that is to share it on social media, write a review, book us for a gig, those sort of things. So it's nice to sort of expand our body of work and make this stuff available.
And when you speak that way, which part of California are you both in, where if somebody wants to get a hold of you and really do something in person, what's the most logical way to approach that?
Well, we're both in the Bay Area. I'm in Marin County, just north of San Francisco, and Doug is in the South Bay.
But we travel.
We travel. Yeah. I mean, most of our playing is in Northern California, but we do get down to Southern California from time to time. Last year we played in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Wow!
And we get around. I travel a little bit more playing solo. I got up to Portland, Oregon last year. I'm actually going over to play in Germany in April for at least 5 gigs.
Cool.
And we kind of we'll play wherever people will have us if it makes sense, either from a financial or a fun factor.
Yep, I hear where you're coming from there. That's for sure. This program might actually air right after or right during NAMM. Are you guys playing together at NAMM by chance?
I will be at NAMM. I'm not playing at NAMM. I'm basically going there for Peghead Nation, which is the company that I co-founded, and I'm actually in the Peghead Nation studio right now here.
Nice.
And for folks who don't know about that, Peghead Nation is a online video learning platform. It's a website, and we have courses for not just guitar, but most other roots music stringed instruments. So guitar, banjo, fiddle, ukulele, banjo, you name it. And Doug actually has a course with us, an alternate tuning fingerstyle course. And I host a advanced fingerstyle workshop on the platform. And so people can check it out. It's pegheadnation.com. And we also do a lot of gear demos. I do most of them, and there's a new one every week. And Doug has done quite a few. Why don't you talk about your course a little bit, Doug? Because that's something that I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in, and it relates to how we work as a duet.
So I did a course for Peghead on alternate tunings, and that was a lot of fun because we spent almost 2 years of shooting a lesson every month. People can now watch it as fast as they can take it in if they subscribe to the course. but I ran through, I've forgotten how many tunings.
It's 24 lessons, so there's quite a few. Yeah.
What I tried to do in the course was to, explain how alternate tunings work and how you think differently when you're in an alternate tuning. When we learn in standard tuning, there's a tendency to just sort of, you learn chord shapes and you just have this sort of approach that everybody has learned in standard tuning, where you may not really understand the relationship between all the strings and things. And with alternate tunings, what I tried to do was break it down and say, what do you need to know in order to be able to play in any tuning? And so if somebody throws a weird tuning at you, how can you, in fairly short order, make some sense out of it? And that's by learning relationships between the strings, intervals, and things like that, and chord shapes, of course. And in every lesson, we did a new song. So I did mostly traditional tunes with doing an arrangement of them. And I thought they turned out pretty nice. In fact, I've actually been recording most of the things I used for the lessons in that series, and I've released them as solo tunes on Spotify over the last year or two. So I hope they're worth learning.
I think the arrangement of The Water is Wide came from the course, didn't it?
I don't remember if I did that, but we've talked at least about doing a couple of them.
I think you might have, and I think I remember being in the lesson, shooting your lesson, thinking we should do that as a duet. So
Could be. Yeah. Well, we've had a few of those. We were just talking before this about another tune that was in there, Red-Haired Boy, that we're still talking about possibly doing as an arrangement.
Yeah, which we haven't recorded yet, but that's one that we're working on. So next release.
Oh wow! When you guys get together, and the times that you are in the same rooms, even if it's not specifically this project, what is more likely? One of you to say, here, check out this guitar, or one of you to say, hey, can I play your guitar?
That definitely is a factor, especially if I go to Doug's, because he has we both have a lot of guitars, but
yes, you do.
We do like to swap guitars, and so yeah, and sometimes Doug will be up here, and I'll have some demo things that I'm shooting demos with for Peghead or something like that. So, and sometimes I should say that if Doug comes up here to Marin, we often combine a visit to Schoenberg Guitars in Tiburon. And if I go down to see Doug in the South Bay, it's not unusual for us to pop over to Griffin Stringed Instruments in Palo Alto. So we're not limited to what we have on hand.
No shortage of guitars to try. And we also, I mean, you do reviews of the guitars for Peghead, and I've done a few, and I'm still doing some things with acoustic guitar where we've even had the same guitar get shipped to you to review, and then it comes down to me.
Oh wow!
So we've had things like that happen. So, obviously we are deep in it, and we really like guitars, and we have a bit of a collection of guitars. On this album, we kind of, I know I played this guitar on most of the steel string cuts, as well as a Loudon that I have, a 6-string Loudon. I played my National Tricone. I played my Mario DeSeo baritone, which I brought in here, which I think I showed people last time we were on the show. This is built by a friend of mine here in the Bay Area, a builder who's a little bit under the radar, but who He's got this sort of amazing story of building mostly for folks locally here in the Bay Area, but almost every single guitar he's built is with a performing artist. So it's really, really cool. And this is the only baritone he's ever built. So I used that on a bunch of stuff, and I think I used my Kenny Hill nylon string on one tune on the album. And Doug, you used kind of this. You have a lot of guitars, but you really only used like 2 or 3 of your 6 strings on the album, I think.
Yeah, and I don't know why. I was just here refreshing my memory, looking at the liner note. I used this Martin on at least one tune. I used my Claxton. I have a couple of Ed Claxton guitars. I used a couple of those on some of the cuts, and I also have a couple of guitars by a luthier named Kent Hamblin, who's another sort of under the radar builder, and I used those on a couple tracks.
People have asked us, how do you pair the guitars? Do you spend a lot of time trying the different guitars and how they sound together? And the answer really is we don't. We kind of play whatever we feel like playing that week, or whichever has the freshest strings on it, or something like that. It's an interesting thing because like my Martin and my Loudon, they're radically different sounding guitars, and yet by the time I play them in recording, I often can't tell which is which. I think there's so much of the sound being in the player that we haven't spent that much time sort of consciously, unless we're looking at like radically different guitars, like baritone and six string or something like that. We don't.
Yeah.
Would you agree, Doug? We don't really spend that much time like trying to pair these guitars.
No, not really. I mean, sometimes in recording, I mean, in fact, I've been trying to record a tune of mine here lately, and I've gone through 3 different guitars because I'll play one and say, nah, it's not working. And I don't know if it's the guitar or me. It's like you try a different guitar and maybe it brings out something different in me. And I go, that time I played it better. I'll credit that to the guitar when it's really probably that I practiced an extra day.
That's funny. This guitar sucks.
I don't know if you remember, Maury and Doug, those tone poem CDs that David Grisman put out 20 years or so ago. And he had these amazing collections of guitars. And I think the first one was him and Tony Rice playing it was like 12 guitars and 12 mandolins. And they were radically different guitars and mandolins. But the whole album, it sounds like Tony Rice and David Grisman. It's just because those two players have such a distinctive sound that, it doesn't matter whether Tony is playing his D28 or whether he's playing an OM or a Gibson Royce Mac, or I'm just making this up. I don't know what he's playing on the tone poems thing, but I do remember that it's a wide range of guitars, and it sounds like Tony Rice. And I think the same kind of thing is true for us. Like it's hard for us not to sound like us.
Sometimes I wish we could change that, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to anger the internet gods. It almost looks like some of the videos getting choppy again. And for us to go through any more than 2 or 3 recycles of trying to get these routers working and the internet connection better. So I would like to quit while I'm ahead. I want to tell you right away that poor Spoon, because I know you never want to get sick and you never want to miss an episode, but boy, he really missed a good one. And if anybody watching this program, listening to this program, has any opportunity in the near future or distant future to see either one of these guys, let alone both of them, please make the effort if you're on the West Coast, or if you bump into them in, where'd you say you were, Oklahoma or something, or somewhere in the Midwest? Wherever.
Well, we should say, since this will air fairly quickly, we are doing an album release show in Berkeley at a great club called The Back Room, and that is on February 9th. And all the info is on our websites. We actually have a joint thing, Teja and Doug Guitar.com. Teja is Teja. Or people can go to my website, Teja Gerken, which is TejaGerken.com. Because that's hard to spell, people can also go to fingerpickingguitar.com, which goes to the same website. And Doug, you're at DougYoungGuitar.com.
Yep.
I want to thank our patrons for all your support. These programs would not work without you. I know we like to joke a lot, but there's nothing funny about it. You guys are the reason we're still here. And from all of us at Martins and More,
thanks for listening.
Hear you later.